Welcome to Design MUSE Podcast, a podcast meant to inspire, educate, and advocate on all things commercial interior design. I am your co-host, Bridget Santos.
And I'm Melanie Hanna.
We are Design MUSE Podcast. We are so excited to bring on our first muse to our podcast. I'm going to introduce Kristina Fischer. She is a development manager at Toll Brothers Apartment Living here in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Kristina.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself to start off?
Yeah, I've been in, architecture and now development for 16 years total. Started out as an architecture major at Oklahoma State University, go Pokes. And I probably was in the architecture industry and at firms for about 8 years total. Then made a shift over to the development side right after I had my first daughter in 2017. And that's where I've been since.
All right.
It's been awesome. Yeah.
So what made you decide to get into design?
Oh my gosh. Well, I definitely have always just had a heart for design. I think I asked my mom this. She confirmed that I was 5. I thought I was 7 when I went with her to her university in Rhode Island. And I just went to school with her one day and she took me to the architecture college and was like, I want to show you these little models. And she just wanted to walk me around. It was very cool. They have a great program there at Roger Williams. And I just kind of fell in love with everything I saw. And I was 5. And I'm like, what is this? How do they do that? This is so small. But there was drawings everywhere. And so from that point on, I think I just kind of continued to develop more curiosity for floor plans and building things, and I guess it just evolved.
So were you a big problem solver when you were a child? So you like solving different things that came up?
It was probably, I guess to me, it might not have been as much that as it is like, I want to make something new. I actually was into like little cars too, weirdly enough, like for a girl, but I used to just create like an entire town for those cars and a whole city and Lincoln Logs, Legos, like whatever I could get my hands on, my parents would buy me. And so every Christmas, it was like all of that stuff. So 3D puzzles were like really big back in like the 90s, like you remember those? Or like castles and stuff you could build with like the foam. And it really like just continued to kind of just be an internal passion that as you kind of go through school, I'm not like, oh, I'm going to be a designer. Like it was just more like, I love doing that stuff. I want to keep doing that as like hobbies. And then once you get into middle school, high school, I'm like, I'm going to start taking classes on this if they offer it.
It's so interesting looking at people's journey because that's one of the things we're really big on. And when we were listening back to our first podcast release about our journeys, we really didn't realize how linked everything is.
Yes.
And at a very early age, I actually can draw my first house that I lived in, and I was 4 when I left.
Honestly, all 3 of us are very unique to know what we wanted to do from a very young age. Because a lot of people that you talk to in this industry, they didn't know really what they wanted to do or maybe went back into it or something like this, and all 3 of us knew at a very young age, this is what we wanted to do, which is super unique.
I feel really blessed for that because it's kind of hard navigating all of that, like into your adolescence and trying to figure out what your passions are and how you can create, make money from it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was not a trajectory that was not that. But what's really funny is when I got into college and picking out colleges and different majors with architecture schools, my mom was like, well, do you have like a backup? Like what happens if you don't get into your 3rd year of architecture school and you have to apply and they only take 30 people and this and that, and I was like, no options. There was no other options.
What was your most memorable moment in college? Do you have a favorite project?
I did a really cool tower that was all made out of wood, kind of in later, I think it was like 4th or 5th year where we did actual kind of construction drawings for it. And then we built the model. And that was just cool because it was kind of just a tower. It was didn't have a lot of function, as you guys had mentioned before, like a lot of it was just so conceptual and what is this saying to, they all were trying to train us to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright. So
right.
Felt like that.
Which is so funny because, in our industry, how much do you see those concepts really pulled through in the beginning, like school was, all the way through the end? How often do you see that from architecture firms?
It's tough because, like, as you grow older and more mature, your concepts get more valid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're pulling ideas from your conceptual thoughts and your, you know, muse and your inspiration into, like, you have to make it a reality. So it is like a little bit more mature thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in college, you really are just pulling out, like, builds, you know, strength, or, you know, how do you do that? You know,
Motion of the ocean.
yeah, very, very fluid things that are just not tangible, you know?
Let's talk about that a little bit, because that is something that comes up a lot. And you put it very well. And I've actually never heard someone mention it just quite like that. You're basically validating your wisdom and your knowledge from all the lessons learned, which we're really big on. It's interesting because you start to hone in on the concepts and you listen a lot more to the clients. So one of the reasons why you're just an awesome person in general, awesome human, but we're really excited about having you on because you have that journey from designer to developer. And we want to hone in on that. So let's talk about when you graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Little Kristina graduated.
I graduated in the downturn, so I had to live with my parents for 3 months.
It was horrible, wasn't it?
Yeah. I heard you talk about that a little bit in your entry podcast. And I think I waited for 3 months. It's just who you know. And I had to, you know, talk to everybody. And I finally got a job at a design build construction company that had a little architecture firm that had Revit, which I hadn't even been in college.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
Early 2000s, that was a really big deal.
And it was a small firm in Louisville, Texas, and they were amazing. They, you know, had Revit. They had their small architecture firm. They had their construction people. And I think I was like one of 3 people on the team.
Wow.
And they just were like, let's build Chewies.
I was so upset during the pandemic because I was pregnant and they took Baja shrimp tacos off the menu. And I was like, what are you doing? Jeez.
Why would you do this to me?
I love Chewy so much.
Yeah, that was a great experience, but that was all, you know, it was kind of schematic, kind of prototype, kind of a lot of CA and some construction documents. And I was just there to learn.
So were you site adapting at that point? Did they have a prototype?
They had a prototype at Site Adapt. Yep. We did a couple of tenant finish outs. Like I did the one on South 7th in Fort Worth. And that was like a 2-story just open space that we put it into. It was very cool. So we did a couple of those. Did a renovation of a church and some things that was actually more interiors, which is funny because I was like, oh, I did actually pick all the flooring and paint and all the things in there, lighting. Just right out of college. So yeah, going through that was amazing experience because of the Revit learning.
Yeah.
Because we had used CAD and obviously like hand drafting at that point. And the Revit experience was able to really boost how marketable I was going forward.
No doubt about that.
After the design build company and going along with your journey, what was your next stop?
So I got like a wild hair and I had never studied abroad. I just kind of opted out of going to the Europe trip in college. And so I said, I'm just going to go live somewhere else in the US. And I kind of mulled some different places over, like California's nice weather, but New York's too crowded. And so I ended up picking DC. My parents met in DC at the FBI. They both worked there. And I just like loved that it was below the Mason-Dixon still, but it was like beautiful city, had all 4 seasons. So I just applied to a bunch of firms up there, a lot of them housing and multifamily. So that was kind of, I always sort of wanted to go that direction. And I don't exactly know why. I think it's just providing housing for people is like impactful for whether it's affordable, whether it's luxury. It's like, I want to create amazing places for people to live.
So your passion for multifamily came before you even touched your first multifamily firm or project or anything like that. Because I didn't even know what multifamily was until I stepped into the firm I was previously at, which is so different from someone who's like passionate at it and then wanted to go into it.
Yeah, there had to have been something, but it was really like housing in general. Maybe it was single family, but it really felt like that's where I probably wanted to go towards. Like I didn't have the medical passion or like commercial. It was just always seemed to be like, I want to create places for people to live.
It's about impacting people where you live and where you're walking to. I know that's a big thing right now is all the walkability-ness of apartment or housing and what's around there. And I think there's going to a lot of things in the future that we're reading about, even just, parking garages and cars, ride sharing and all the things that are being predicted that it's going to change. It's going to pivot. And but housing in general, I think we're going to see definitely an uptick of all that. So that's really cool that you knew that early on. So where did you land from there?
So I got a job in DC and it was great. I got an apartment, got a roommate off Craigslist. It all worked out amazingly. And they did multifamily. So I actually ended up working there for just under a year before speaking with a firm downtown Georgetown on K Street. And I was like, okay, that's where I really want to be, because I want to be like in DC and like everything over there was amazing. So my first job was actually in Tyson's Corner. And so in Virginia, across the bridge. So I'm like, I want to go across the bridge where all the stuff is in the real DC. And so I just went over there and, I had some connections through friends I had made. And so that's how we got to talking. And then they were like, well, we really have a position you could be good at. And I think there is where really multifamily launched. We did a lot of beautiful high rises for Great Gulf out of Canada, and they were really high design, high budgets. And I was really into the beginning schematics, and that was super fun. And the office was beautiful, and it was so high energy, and all the people in there were young. It was just amazing. So I spent all my money that I made because I'm in Georgetown, went to happy hour like every night.
You were networking.
Oh, yeah. But not every day.
But you got that job from networking. Yeah. So relationships are so.
Yes.
What is
who you
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's it.
Mm-hmm. It is all about who you know.
Yes. It's so impactful because it's who you know, because trust, relationships, and knowing who people are. And like, I'm just a huge advocate on like higher character trained skills. And yeah, you have to have the bases, but like the character and the person, and do you vibe with them and do you like them? And I think the mesh between the personal and the work world is just inevitable. And so, yeah, it's a big deal.
It is, because you're putting your neck on the line or someone is, when they're recommending you for a job. And if you don't have that direct factor, it's huge.
Right. Yeah. It's on me. Yeah. Like it's a reflection, just like your kids.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, I'm going to school with those short shorts on. Like, where is your mother?
So you're at a multifamily firm. Tell us a little bit about what you did there specifically and how that launched to the next step.
And was it still architecture based, or were you
architecture firm? Yep. It was a great firm. Did a lot of multifamily, worked on some stuff in DC as well. Cool projects that were multi-unit, really large square footage averages, like very cool, unique urban infill stuff, this really cool high rise. And I did a lot of schematics. So I was in client meetings a lot. I was working with a good friend of mine who's now in Houston. She was kind of a mentor to me, where we were just always in front of clients. Here's our designs. We're pinning up stuff. We're throwing things out on the table. We're talking through everything that we're doing and the ideas. And then we take their feedback and get to work.
Yeah.
So it was just such I don't remember it ever being like a grind or like a job, because it really was fun. And like I said, there's so many young people, and like, it was just
like a way
to be single. Yeah. And it was just like I said, it was kind of my time away from being in Dallas. Like I'd been in Texas since 5th grade and had to like go experience some stuff, like just live on my own. And
well, that synergy is important too. That can definitely make and break a team. And I see it all the time. It's really, you can see transparently. It doesn't matter if it's an architecture firm, design firm, development. You can see the difference and how the teams work with the synergy when everybody gets along and everyone respects each other.
Yeah.
And that's a huge deal. And it shows in design.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. And it sounds like you had a good mentor that was able to. Bridget and I laughed in our first episode. You were like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about.
And you're like, she's my mentor. And I'm like, that's so cute. I love it. Right. Yeah. But even like the way I write is because of Melanie, the way that there's certain like key things that I do that we'll get together. And she's like, yeah, I do that too. And I'm like, oh, I know why I do that. So mentors are so important.
we were talking earlier today. I just hired on a new designer. That's amazing. But it turned out very much like Bridget and I a little bit, but we ended up having the same mentor right out of school, even though it was a 10, 12-year difference. And so now I'm, older and, her mentor and that kind of thing. But it's interesting the way she works because I see a lot of it in myself. And that's because we had one of the same mentors. And that's interesting that carried that far into your career. So it's a person that builds your career.
Yeah.
It builds the stepping stones of that. So let's move on to the next chapter of design for you, or what was the next step from there?
Well, I did want to mention too that lifelong friends developed in DC. Lifelong friends forever and ever. But I think that experience allowed me to really open up as a person, because I was thinking through, college is really about can you get through this? Do you have enough grit? Can you make it? It's not so much about the process of the design or CDs or, it's can you just make it through this turmoil, if you will, the college, because college is hard, but it's kind of finding yourself. And then DC was finding myself even more at 25, quarter life, not crisis, but awesomeness. And then me and my husband, who dated in college, got back together after 7 years. That's what brought me back to Texas. So I interviewed with a bunch of architecture firms, most of them doing multifamily, and my sweet dad brought me around, and I didn't have a car because I was living in DC. And so he would bring me around to each interview, and I had 3 in one day, and then 3 in one day. And then the next day I had 2. So we just busted him out, and he was so sweet. And then got a few offers and took the best one in multifamily with GDA here in Victory Park. And that's really where the trajectory of all of this really took off, because that's the client that I ended up going to.
Wow.
After working there.
Really cool.
I was there 1 year to the day.
Wow. Huh.
It's very strange.
That is.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about what made you decide to go into development. Can you tell that story specifically?
I sort of selfishly feel like it was oh, well, I feel like there's more money on that side.
I've heard that.
Which is this out? Is this true? But knowing myself, and I'm a little bit of a control freak in a good way, but I really like to control the situation. And I feel confident in a lot of my decisions, and I have proof of them being correct or whatever. And it's one of those things where, working for this specific client on their jobs, it was what can I do for you? And I just loved the way that they worked on their projects and how they owned them. What is the identity? And the way that they did things was just the first exposure I'd had to real multifamily development. And it was incredibly attractive because it was you guys do it all. I mean, you guys buy the land, you hire all the consultants, everything from start to finish.
Right.
And so I thought that was just so cool, because our role with architecture was just this. And I kind of liked that. I was thinking bigger picture, and I was this could be very cool, and it could be a challenge that I wanted to explore.
That's cool. What is one thing that you wish that you would have known when you were designing that now on the development side, you wish every interior designer would know?
Well, over there, I was working on the architecture. They had ended up having to let go of the ID firm. And so they called my boss, who ended up being also a really great mentor. And they called him and was we need help. We don't have an ID firm. Can somebody in-house do it? And that was an architect of record at the time, right? And he was you're going to do it, And I'm thanks for having so much faith in me for just one person over there doing the whole 10,000 square feet of amenity space and the units, And that's really where I was all right, I can do hard things. I'm going to do it. And it was just super, super fun, where I met all those reps, and all the relationships that was formed were so amazing, So in the process of all of that, I wish I would have gotten out of my bubble, because now I'm oh my gosh, I would have had at least 4 more coordination meetings. I would have talked to these folks more, or gotten them on board earlier, or I would have tried to coordinate with these third-party fitness consultants. It was very much I just wish I would have like gotten out of like what I'm doing with my blinders on in Revit, detailing away and getting the floor finish plan and dimensioning. It's like you're so consumed in it all at the time. And you know that it's going to be amazing. It's important. And this is the design. It's like that. But that's really like all you're thinking, like a lot of what you're thinking about. And I think at that age, I mean, then, because I was just still, you know, fairly young, or at least in terms of experience, it was like, I just need to step back and be like, okay, where's my MEP at? Where's my structural at? Where are my columns?
You must have tunnel vision.
Totally.
I jumped back in the model this week. I think my team was like, oh, good gosh, get her out of here. But I was trying to help. And I was like, oh my gosh, if you're not in here for a minute, it is. Yes. It's a learning curve.
No, it sounds like you always kind of wanted to step out and see big picture things instead of just individual design, problem solving, or, you know, strengths. You wanted to step out and say, okay, what's the big picture of this project? Who are we, you know, building this for? What is our clientele? And, you know, we talked a lot in the first podcast how a whole team makes one project successful. There's no way that it's, you know, one architect or one designer, or one developer. There's so much that goes into it to create the team to then make the project successful. So on the development side, how do you choose that right team to make the successful project happen?
It's a learning curve. It really depends on experience and what experiences you've been through with certain firms and certain folks and different companies. And it's also like, do your values align? A lot of it is values, like what does their portfolio look like, but what does it feel like in person? You know, how do we work together? How are we going to work together? Personalities. Everybody has to get used to different personalities, and it's hard sometimes and easy sometimes. But like, I think from a development standpoint, it's relationships, it's success of previous projects. Where did things go wrong? How did you solve the problem? You know, even if it wasn't us as the owner or something, you know, but there's a lot that goes into that. And then of course, just repetition after that, because you start to get to know each other, and it's like you date a little and then you get married.
You're like, I know what shower pan you want.
Exactly.
I have a client right now, and we're doing another repeat project with them, and we were joking about that. It's like, seriously, I know what shower pan you like, and the faucets that.
And they typically know like what we would want to spend.
Yeah.
Right. And they
and we're going to spend money. We're going to spend money.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. Huge. So that's a good segue into budgets for projects. So can you tell us a little bit about, from the development side, how does a developer come up with their budgets for a project? Because I know some developers I know are more about like proximity principle. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For us specifically, I think, you know, we start with, you know, where is this piece of land? Do we want to build here? We have a saying like, we'd love to build at Main and Main, but how do we do that successfully? And is this the right demographic? And what type of building can we put on here? And then there's a bunch of questions kind of just answered in your head, like as our acquisitions folks are working with the brokers on finding sites. And I think going into underwriting is huge, because it's just a lot of information in one place, and then it spits out what you need to know. Technically, I don't even want to pretend to get into the underwriting process, because it's like,
that's not something that is talked about when we were in school.
Not at all.
And
not at all.
I didn't know anything about commercial real estate.
Yeah.
And I think it is sometimes still, it baffles me when I see different in every brokerage firm is a little bit different, and then in development firms. And so from the underwriting process,
so it's all about returns.
All about return on investment.
It's what is our rock? Like, what is our return on cost, return on ROI? Like, where are we going to make money on this job? I mean, we're a business and we develop, but like, I'm always sitting in two seats, because I have a passion for design, and I have a passion for building beautiful spaces for people to live and to thrive, you know? And then I'm like, okay, we have to make money too, you know? Yeah. But yeah, it's all about kind of underwriting, making sure that that number is where we want it to be. And then, all right, let's see what we can build here.
So most of the time, your first impression on a lot of projects is going to be where you spend the most money. What other things are you seeing money spent, more dollars allocated towards for these multifamily projects?
one thing that I've kind of honed in on a little bit more in the past, been here 3 years now, is underwriting develops what our budget really is going to be. And I think once you kind of know that, you start to get these rules of thumb, like $40 a square foot amenity, or, or 50 or 30 or something. And so that's where you really start to understand kind of what you can spend. And once the budget is set, it's like I always say, I'd rather spend more money on a smaller space that is super impactful and that is very memorable and that is great first impression. And, a lot of these amenity spaces are sales tools,
right?
Almost more so than if they're being used that way.
You almost have a tour path that you're learning about,
right,
in every sector. Because I work in hospitality and multifamily, student housing, all of it, corporate, and it is all about the tour path. And
it totally is.
Different stops and the impact that that's going to have as you walk through the space, and how it's going to either empower you or encourage you. I was talking with a broker earlier this week about a project, and I said, oh my gosh, you need a mural here. This speaks to people as you go in and out. And he was like, I've never thought about that. You think? I'm like, oh yes, perfect. The wall, perfect wall for it.
Yes.
But it needs to be impactful. It doesn't need to be something that's cheesy. Let it speak to people. Let it speak to the community.
Yeah. And it's also the fact that it might be that sales tool path, but it's also usable.
Right.
Or like, how do you actually make it where it's both and you're really getting your money's worth on the design? Because, it may not be something that doesn't get used all the time, but it does sell to get people to leave.
Art is amenity.
Yeah,
I've seen it. It is. It just depends on, I think, the community that you're going into, for sure. But it definitely is. So speaking of amenities, what are some of the amenities that you're seeing right now that are most popular, and what's the most off the wall one? Because I've heard some really off the wall things, and I am just thinking, look,
tell me what they are. Tell me more.
So again, working in all these different sectors, I feel like I see it all. And I think hospitality is being a lot on the forefront of things. And then I feel like multifamily catches up. Multifamily and student housing are both in the run for that, I feel like.
Yes.
And then it gets to corporate, and then poor senior living over there. It's just like, hey, can we have a just now golf simulation? I love that. So I'm like, yes, let's do it.
Yes.
The bars or whatever. But what are some of the things that you've seen?
Well, every time we have this conversation, we all get like super giddy and have this huge list, and we're like, oh my gosh, let's research all this cool stuff, because it's really fun to figure out like what people may want in their property. But as Bridget knows, you probably even more than me, I'm like over here, like, you tell me what I need to put in my property, because from a trend standpoint, infrared saunas, are still pretty hot. Getting in like a cold plunge is pose some complications with just like sanitary and stuff like that.
I was going to say a lot of amenities I feel like are driven, and it has to be a conversation of how management is going to manage the amenity, because it can be an amazing amenity idea like a cold plunge and infrared sauna really give this node back to self-care and health that's really pushed right now. But if your management team cannot manage that properly, then it was money spent that is not really going to be used, which you kind of touched on, amenities not being used, but maybe being a selling point for people to lease. Do you think that it's more important that the residents are using the amenities, or that it's impactful?
It has to be both.
Right. It has to be both.
That's the design problem to solve.
Exactly. Like you need residents to be using the amenities and to feel like, and it has to be affordable, and it has to be managed. Right. I mean, everything to go together, right?
That is really the problem to solve, because it's so all encompassing, where it's like, where are we going to put our money in the most impactful places? Is it a selling point on the tour path? Is it useful? Is management going to really love this if it has 100 real plants in it?
Right.
All those things that, you have to kind of go through. And at least those people and those parties and third-party consultants are getting involved a lot earlier now. And it's like just this huge collaborative effort, like through the whole process.
And that's one thing that I've noticed in multifamily that makes a successful project is bringing the management day one. I mean, contractor, management, all the consultants to really, there has to be a management budget every month, right? And you have to make sure that what you're designing and what you're building is going to fit within that budget, number one.
Budget, definitely.
Exactly. But also, if they're bought in on the idea and can sell the idea, that's huge for future residents that come in and go on this tour path.
Yep. Another amenity back to that was a maker's garage or a maker space. And I know that's been we were doing that back even 10 years ago, but I still find it very interesting because of the way it can mold to the demographic, the location, the need. And it still can be, I just really like versatile spaces. So if it can be versatile and it can have a resident breakfast, but it can also have like a plant making
brewery class.
Totally. Brewery.
One of the ways we're getting 3D printers. That we're getting a request for that a lot.
Cool.
And I was actually 3D printing a business card holder. I was on it's casework.
I love
this is on yes. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But that is a cool thing. And it kind of brings you back to that childhood. Like one thing we're seeing a lot is anything that is kind of an adult playground.
Yes, exactly. It's just fun.
Yeah.
Like, let's get back to some fun stuff. The golf simulator is cool, but it gets real beat up
very
quickly. Obviously, just hitting balls around all over the place, but it is cool. And then, I think right now, just all of the conversation around co-working and making sure that you have spaces where people can just take their laptops and go and be super versatile. And then, but yet the leasing is over here closing on an application. I think versatile spaces are key. I also really like the idea of like a coffee shop, coffee bar. I think we need to start enhancing our like coffee and beverage stations. It is a little bit more on the management, I think, to maintain that, but I think it could be really cool because it is part of co-working.
Right.
It's like it already starts to like mold into those functions.
And there's so many like third-party consultants now who do a grab and go station where you can walk through and scan something and grab, a little nutrient bar and a water and go and sit back down, which is very hospitality driven. Back to your point, hospitality's been doing that forever, but now let's put it within multifamily co-working space.
Yeah. I'm kind of like anything I can do where I don't have to leave.
Right.
Okay. So that's what I was about to say. We had a client probably about a year or two ago say, I want you to come up with things that give people back time. So think about concierge services, dry cleaning. You don't have to have those things in there, but the concierge service can take care of it and come back, or dog walking, or a sundry shop, or maybe it's, again, going back to that proximity principle. But even as interior designers, I think it's really great to be able to think about those things and the synergies. Yeah. And then the connection to the outdoors and the wellness factor too.
Huge.
Wellness side, I think it's really great having just that plug and play so you can do your workout. And just have a place to plug in.
There's actually a bike I found online that I love. I'm putting in my next property. Like, I'm doing it. But it is an actual bike where you can put your laptop up there. And it looks very functional, and it's like, and I can put it in the co-working space, but it could be like next to the gym
or whatever.
So cool. It looked like a really cool piece. I'm like, I might need that for home.
Another huge piece of feedback that I've gotten from management surveys of, residents and what they like and what they don't like. A lot of times developers will push to have all the amenities as possible within a small space, right? But no resident wants to be in a co-working space that is right in front of the leasing manager who's going to be watching everything that they do, right? Yeah. So space planning comes into play huge when it's, multifamily amenities, because you have to have that presence of a concierge or leasing agents, however your setup is. But residents do not want to be working where the staff can watch them do everything.
I do have something to add to that I think is very, very important at the beginning, is that there's the tour path. There's amenities that, you all want to fit, like the different ones, fitness, co-working, and everything. And what was really important on this last job is it all opened in turn one. And the fact that we were able to open it in turn one with people moving in, 12 or 15 people moved in that weekend, and we were able to have all of the amenities. And there was one amenity down that wasn't open, but that's okay because 95% of the amenities were in turn one.
Right.
even though they were not on top of each other. So it's like, know the phasing. What is the phasing? What's going to turn when and how? And that is just so important, because I think getting the main amenities into that first turn is also going to like keep people from leaving a construction site.
Right.
Because they're already getting.
And that's more than just the construction side of it with the FF&E side.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you talked a lot about phasing and turns. People listening might not know what that means in phases of construction. So, and it's not something we've talked about yet. So can you explain what it means to have different turns in a project and phases in a project?
Well, it depends on the project type, of course, but typically, and me being in multifamily, you're dealing with a big project, a big 300 plus unit job. And it has to, a lot of jurisdictions kind of dictate that. And a lot of times it's really up to the fire marshal to kind of give us what they want or what the rules of the phasing is there. So I think when you're dealing with such a large project like that, you're going to end up finishing parts of the project sooner than others. And you want people living in that building as soon as humanly possible.
Right.
And getting those rents. So I think making sure that you're following everything that you need to up front in your pre-development meeting with your architect and your city and your fire marshal. That's like the most crucial meeting of the whole job, in my opinion. But that is when you can start to really dictate which phases open first, how many units, where's the pool going to be, what's going to happen on the outside, how is the parking garage going to work. Right now, we've, had to section off the lower part of the parking garage for staging of construction materials, but all the upper levels can be used. So it's a lot of coordination, but it's so nice because phasing allows you to get people in the project. You can start to prioritize what spaces are done first. And like I said, those amenity spaces are super important to people, or that they may want to use when they're living there, even though it's still under construction, is like a godsend to them, right. And then we get people in the building when we need them to be. So yeah, it's all about that priority. And then understanding the city jurisdiction and fire marshal requirements, because
so that's a good segue into a question that we had for you about what is the hardest part of being a developer?
I'd say it's probably just trying to manage like 18 different hats, wearing 18 different hats. And that's really specifically, and it's fun, don't get me wrong, but it's like, oh my gosh, if, I have to, hire all the consultants, hire the contractor, make sure that everybody's paid. You've got all these tertiary consultants like fitness and signage and everything, that goes into, working with your marketing folks. And I think just the managing of all of that and making sure stuff doesn't slip through the cracks and that people get paid on time is probably the most challenging, because you have to prioritize it. But then some of these other things may not happen that month but you get used to it. And then you start to compartmentalize a little bit better, and you start to organize yourself, and you start to set up reminders on your calendar. And then you start to set up time on your calendar to attack different tasks. And
is that how you manage your time and your to-do list?
When it
your
starts
calendar?
to get overwhelming, you don't know what to go to first. Everything is a high priority, and I'm accountable. So it's like this project, I'm the owner, but it's like you're accountable for it all. So I do have to do that. Those are some tactics that I've used, is just throwing time on my calendar to try to, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm not
You're planning ahead.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of designers ask how to keep up with. Now, this might be like a program for some.
Yep.
You said a calendar. Is it a physical calendar or your Outlook calendar?
Outlook, yeah, it's in Outlook. Okay. Yep. Sometimes I set reminders on my phone.
Do you use Task?
I do not.
You don't?
No.
Do you do a to-do list?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm trying to not be a dinosaur. And I have 4 notebooks in my purse right here.
I love that. I like how you're about to grab one. They're like,
let me show you the pages of these notebooks.
Did they have perfect squares around the architectural squares that you're checking off? Because that's what
I actually do an X. I went from a check mark because I didn't like that the check went out of the box. Although I think out of the box, so I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I started doing X's from corner to corner because it looked better. But yeah, no, I've been trying to retire the notebooks and go on my OneNote on my computer.
It was hard. I did that several years ago. I used to have what's called a passion planner. So I finally decided to archive that, and I went to OneNote.
Okay.
And now I have been using Task or the planner version out of Outlook, and it has changed my life.
Okay, I'm looking
And
into it.
I've gotten several of my young designers to start doing it when they're really overwhelmed with having our designers work on anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 projects at one, depending on if it's a monster, you might have to. So, but the thing is there's so many different things coming in different phases. And so what that allows for is you can tag your email and then put it into basically that bucket of that project.
Yes.
And then you can actually schedule it for that day. So when I come in on Monday, I can say, okay, these were all the things that I did not do this week. And then here's the things that I already had planned for my day. And
I love it.
do I use it always? No, I still love that paper copy of it.
I do.
But it's been a game changer for sure. For me personally.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a minute to get used to. But once you start seeing all the buckets and you can physically check that box, and if you have your AirPods on, you hear a thing.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
It's very rewarding. As you grow in your career, you can have humor about these things, and learning to pivot along the way is a really important thing.
Just being flexible.
Oh,
Like some things aren't going to get done.
Right.
And sometimes I'm waiting on stuff, and I've done all I can. So it's just like, it's just the coordination of just like, you know what, you're going to have to let that be for a second.
Mm-hmm. And for control freaks, that's hard. And, you've got 3 in this room that want to control every aspect of everything, and you have to rely on others, or
There's a sense of like where you may just have to do that.
right.
And you just got to own it.
And right at the end of the day, interior design is a lot of decision making. Development is a lot of decision making. And being a consultant to a developer, you have to come up with all these decisions that you're going to make before you present it to the developer. And then you're ultimate of the decisions that, are being actually applied to the project. So what I tell a lot of young designers sometimes is just make the decision and keep going. Don't harp on one thing. That tile could be 50 things. Let's make the best choice and the best budget, and let's keep going. Let's not spend 5 hours tweedledeeing,
Design is a series of multiple decisions.
Exactly.
That are never ending.
Mm-hmm. I know.
It's so fun though.
It is fun.
It is. It's very rewarding to just get it out and then see it being built, and then being in those spaces and seeing how it impacts the community or the people is an incredible thing. That's one of my favorite things of a job, is going in and being a fly on the wall, and no one knows that you had blood, sweat, and tears, and you're just sitting there and you're hearing people talk about the space for the first time. That's an incredible experience.
Do you guys remember like the first time you stood on a job site that you were on from very start to very finish? Do you remember like the feeling you had when you were there?
I definitely do on my high rise in Houston. And that was when I went from architecture firm to going and working for the client that I was working on that project for. And we worked so well together. That's when they were like, "Can you come work for us?" I'm like, "Yes." But I mean, we talked about it, and it was just the trajectory that we were talking about with the goals and like understanding kind of like where you wanted to go with your career and stuff. And I didn't really think too hard about it. I think I just did it, and I was like, "This is going to be great because I can control more probably, or whatever, or at least I have, I can do more and be involved in more." But I worked on it at that firm. And then once I got over to the client side, we finished it off. I finished it.
Mm-hmm.
So standing at the grand opening and like being in there with all those people, and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, we did this."
Right.
And everybody has such good feedback.
That's why we do it, right? Yeah. I mean, it's when you're standing in that space, and it used to be grass and a field or whatever it is. And we have created this memorable building that's going to be there for the long run. It might be renovated 5 times. I mean, I've renovated projects that I've designed already, new client comes in and buys the building and wants to turn it into something else or wants to implement something different. Yeah. So, renovating your own projects can be kind of a funny experience, but there's nothing that beats standing there surrounded by the whole team that you had the blood, sweat, and tears on, and having a successful project.
So you have a few kids?
Yeah, I have 2 girls.
2 girls.
Yeah.
I'm a girl mom as well.
Nice.
Oh, very similar, 4 and 9. How is that as a working mom? I sat on a panel recently and I had someone ask me, how do you do it? Because there's no way that I could think about having kids right now. And I said, a lot of people end up delaying or don't. And they said, well, how do you do it?
Right. Well, sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't. That's the answer, right?
Sometimes you just, need to go get a massage and check out for a while. But I think it's tough because when you're not in the situation yet and you see, it's perceived differently from all these, those folks, the ones that haven't maybe gotten into that yet or gotten into kids yet or whatever. It kind of starts to organically happen where you really just start to just do it.
There's no option, right?
There's no option.
People ask me the same question. How do you run a business with 2 little kids?
Yeah.
I don't have another option.
I also outsource.
Yeah, you just...
I had my laundry service delivered this morning.
Right.
With all of my girls' clothes. I give them the hangers. I give them a couple shirts that I need ironed. Mm-hmm. I give them the dryer sheets I need, whatever. It's if you can try to get the help you need, that's one thing is okay, how resourceful can we be on that? I pick where I want to live versus living close to work because my living environment is my
sanctuary.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And my respite. So making sure that you take time for yourself is huge. Prioritize fitness and health. And I could just go down a list of things that I've done just in the last year or two that are just okay, I have to do this. I have to do this now for myself, Mm-hmm. And then of course, having a good partner is just so important. My husband, I would not be able to do it without him, and just the support and he works full time too. So, we're both.
I think we all 3 are kind of in the same situation where, we're very driven and passionate women in the industry. And without having that partner that is there for you and doesn't stop you from doing more and more and more.
So true. I mean, I moved into the neighborhood where my parents live just, for their love and support. And also my kids' relationship with them is so important as they start to get older and they get older, the influence. If me and my husband are, working full time, they still have that kind of parent aspect or the guidance or the extra that might be a little bit missing. And you always just also try to fill their cups when you can.
Right.
And it's I read this great thing where it may be not true or it might be true, but it's the first 10 minutes of the day and the last 10 minutes of the day for them are just the most important. Mm-hmm. So if you can give them what they need in the morning and at night, they will be happy, and they will also look up to us. I mean, they will. I know my mom is one of my biggest mentors, and, she was a career woman, driven and completely and utterly passionate about her work.
Right.
So I wonder where I got that from. So, it's just one of those things where, you just have to balance it all. And like I said, it kind of organically happens because you don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice.
And you make decisions based on what you have to do.
And every family unit is different.
Yep.
Everybody makes it work one way or another.
Yeah.
And whether it's that supportive partner that steps in or those grandparents that live nearby that step in, or
I think that's been a game changer because I felt before the pandemic, I was traveling a lot and I had a 2-year-old and I didn't have the second yet. And I was traveling a lot. Matter of fact, I knew I was up for a promotion at my job and it was very male driven firm.
Yeah.
I was actually one of the first woman designers that was in leadership there. And I actually did not tell them I was pregnant until probably 22 weeks or so. I covered myself with scarves on and stuff because I didn't want to miss that promotion. I didn't want to be looked down on. I know. And so the pandemic actually was a very good thing for me because I stopped traveling. My doctor was like, no. Right.
Yeah, same. I was pregnant in the second during the pandemic and we were sent home for 2 years.
Yeah, right.
I literally worked from home for 2 years.
And then I realized, oh my gosh, I can get so much done. And having that flexibility is, mental health is top of mind right now. And for most companies. And just having that flexibility has been a game changer as a parent, whether you're a father that is, more involved pickup and all that kind of stuff. Because I know my husband and I trade off that flexible work environment. And we talked about on the first podcast who your boss is or who your direct report is really important. Whatever is in your life right now that is important to you, making sure that you can have that flexibility for that is very crucial. Whether it's kids or a passion or...
It's a definite.
Yeah.
I mean, I get a lot of work done.
Right.
All the things.
So our big why at Design Muse is to inspire, educate, and advocate. So we have a few questions for you targeted specifically towards that. As far as the inspiration part, what has inspired you the most in your career?
Oh gosh. Well, my mom, my mentor, she's inspired me to really strive for doing the best that you can do. And having that grit, I think, is huge because if you have somebody that you can turn to, it inspires in different ways. It inspires you to work hard, but the work hard inspires you to produce things that you didn't think you could. And I think that making sure you've kind of surround yourself with the right people that really inspire kind of the character of who you are and the work ethic, it will then turn into like all these other amazing things, especially in our industry and design, because it just starts to like really allow you to, get your creative juices flowing. So, I mean, creating a world that's going to be good for our kids and just future generations in general, like let's create amazing spaces for people to live in, work and play. I think just future generations are really important in inspiring us to do better, be better, and make sure that we're providing those things. And that also is what gives us such fulfillment in our jobs where, this is where the passion comes from.
So when you're young and your parents are saying you are who you hang out with.
Yes. Surround yourself with the people and that you even aspire to be. Try to be around people that are even better than you. That's inspiring.
For sure. And I think, there's been certain times where I've just reached out to people that I look up to that may not even know me.
Totally.
Following their career, and they probably think I'm a little bit of a creeper, but I want to be able to follow along those journeys and want to be there too and learn from them. So be inspired by them. Because I think that I'm very much into, and Bridget is as well, the rise and tide lifts all ships philosophy. Yeah. And so if we can all grow together and have that growth mindset and help each other out, and that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah.
That kind of leads into our educate side. What is the biggest lesson learned you've had that you would want to share with the design community?
I think the biggest lesson is maintaining your relationships and not letting little things get in the way of that, because it is who you know. Just circling back to the beginning, because who you know is so important. Those connections and just how you go about like making decisions about where you're going to work or what kind of projects you want to work on and all that. I mean, I think the relationships are key to also getting what you want. Mm-hmm. And as a woman in this industry, it's like, if you don't have good relationships, you're not going to get what you want.
That is very true. So one last question for you on the avocation side of it. If you had all the funds in the world, all the money, just all the investors backing it, what would you do to be a change maker?
Well, first and foremost, I would build a compound for my friends and family. Like, living off the land, community gardens. We'd chickens.
I love it.
I would definitely have my 100 dachshunds, like breeding. Like I'd have, it all set up, all cute and perfect. And I have someone come in, and outsourcing. Remember, I think it would be surrounded by housing. It would be like, how can we create these how do we get people off the streets? I mean, I can't believe that's just not more of a thing. Mm-hmm. Like there should not be homeless people. Mm-hmm. And I understand there's mental health issues. I understand there's addiction issues and all these things that really need to, be solved and implemented to help these folks. But like, if we were able to provide communities where we had professionals and doctors and people that would advocate for, we create it. It's again about responsibility. It's almost like when a child has more chores, they start to get a sense of self, and that actually builds their confidence. So, if you have 3 things you need to do and you accomplish them internally and psychologically, it's building their confidence up. It's the same thing with like folks that we could get off, that it's like, let's make this happen where we can create communities that would allow them to thrive and then grow and then be part of the community as a whole.
Right.
I mean, it should be happening everywhere in every urban city.
Right.
And so,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, affordable housing is a huge topic that we have not accomplished yet.
No.
And so it's an ongoing topic pretty much at every conference I go to, every panel I listen to. Exactly. And it's, how are we going to solve this affordable housing crisis with the cost of construction and the cost of land and, interest rates and everything like that. So all that money, all that magical money, I think it's just so neat from a developer to hear that it goes back to the passion of wanting to house people that don't have a home. And when that's a developer's passion, you can tell through their projects how thoughtful it is. And, it's just a testament to what a great development manager you are and the passion that you have for this industry. Not all developers think that way. Some developers are more interested in their return. And when you have the passion behind it, I think, which of course we know is important. We all have to make money, but it's just awesome to hear from the development side that that's such a passion.
Yeah. And it's like you're going to make the funds when you're putting your heart into something that you care about. Like I said, it's like a give and take thing. It's just like relationships. You're going to give and you're going to get back the fruit of that effort.
Right. Exactly.
So it's huge.
Well, thank you for your time today. We loved having you on here and all the knowledge and wisdom that you've shared. Your journey is very inspiring. Very inspiring. There's so many designers out there that don't want to be in design. And one of our goals is to share other avenues. And thank you for that.
Yes. It's a great avenue, especially it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's needed. I mean, being kind of the only design oriented person in my particular office is a huge benefit to the group.
Right.
And it is an avenue. It's a great and there's multiple within development too that can be explored, but it's been great talking to you guys.
Thank you so much for being our first Muse on Design Muse podcast.
Thank you.
Until next time.